Fiona and Cake's second season got announced for October 23rd, and to commemorate my favorite show's return, I want to talk about 5 episodes of Adventure Time that demonstrate why I hold it in such high regard. Some are on here because of their narratives, others are on here because of the character work, and some are just here because they're my favorite episodes. Let's get to it. The episode taking the number 5 spot is Jermaine. This is a new pick along with Abstract because episodes like these hit closer to home in my 20s than they did when I was a teenager. Jermaine is an episode about letting go of the past to move forward in life, to move beyond the prisons we make for ourselves or that others make for us. In this episode, Finn and Jake go check on their brother in their old home. Throughout the episode, we see Jermaine get more and more frustrated seeing how carefree his brothers are allowed to be compared to him, who had the responsibility of keeping demons at bay, which forced him into a cyclical routine every day because their dad gave him the house and, by proxy, the responsibility that came with it. This responsibility became a prison that Jermaine refused to free himself from. At the end of the episode, the house is burning with all the artifacts that the demons were looking for, and Jermaine just lets it burn and finally frees himself of other people's responsibilities and expectations and is able to start anew and find new purpose. And when we see him in Abstract, we see that he has changed, accepting a new path in life, and helps Jake accept his new changes. This hits close to me, especially right now, because I've recently had to acknowledge the prison I've locked myself in. I'm getting through it, and I'm on my own path of rediscovering who I am, who I want to be, and how to be closer to my ideal self. So looking at the episode through that lens, it becomes a lot more impactful, especially for where I am personally right now. The next episode I'll be talking about is Simon and Marcy. Simon and Marcy takes the number 4 spot because it's an episode that hits so many emotional and narrative beats that I can't help but love it. It also has Simon, my favorite character, as a focal point. The themes of found family and finding the small positives in awful situations are really sweet, but the bittersweet note this episode ends on is what made it hit so much harder. Because we don't always get the happy ending that we wished for, and we make do with the cards we're dealt. Throughout the episode, we see the father-daughter bond Simon and Marcy have developed in this hellscape they found themselves in, as well as Simon's determination to keep his adopted daughter safe even at the cost of his mental and physical stability. This episode wasn't the first time we were shown that these two had known each other. We saw it in I Remember You, but this episode gave I Remember You, as well as their future interactions and comments about each other, context. One of the future interactions that sticks out in my mind is from Fiona and Cake's first season, where, in The Star, Simon sees what Marceline is like in a reality where she didn't have him, and was taken in by the Vampire King. When he sees how she turned out, his reaction is, how did my little Marcy turn into that? Referring to her being genuinely evil as opposed to her being playfully antagonistic throughout the main run of Adventure Time, or at least when she was first introduced. And Fiona points out that she probably turned out this way because she didn't have Simon in her life. That moment works so well because we know what these two mean to each other, and that understanding comes from this episode. Since this isn't a full episode breakdown, I'm going to jump down to the end of the episode. The bittersweet ending of the flashback with Simon reaching the point of no return after using the crown to protect Marcy was such a short moment for the emotions packed into it. Simon singing the Cheers theme to retain some of his sanity, him getting more aggressive as the song goes on, and calming down to show what he has become, who we now know as the Ice King, capping it off with him calling Marcy Gunter. That was so sad to see, but outside of the flashback, Finn, Jake, and Marcy are looking at the Ice King with smiles, proud of who he was while accepting who he is now. There's also the subtle narrative about family and dementia that goes on in this episode, but I feel like that is something that people more qualified to talk about that have done, and that I would have to set aside an entire video to really break down. So, maybe one day. The number 3 spot goes to Card Wars. Unlike the other episodes on this list that have some deeper reason for me enjoying them, Card Wars is just fun, with a bit of relating to the episode. I'd go so far as to say Card Wars is top 3 most fun episodes and most rewatchable episodes of Adventure Time. This episode gives off heavy siblings just hanging out on a day off vibes. I've been in situations before with my siblings and friends playing games, and it gets more aggressive, but it's all love. All the crazy talk, the butt hurt, taking a dive, I've been on both sides of all of these situations. Though admittedly, I'm a pretty average gamer and my siblings are literal pro gamers or pro gamer level. I still relate to this episode though. Once again, the episode is pure fun that anyone who has gamer siblings can relate to. Everything you enjoy doesn't need some deeper meaning. Sometimes it's just cool to have some fun. Though normally I do like a bit more depth in the media I consume. I'm one of those pricks. I want to throw out some honorable mentions before we go on to the top 2 spots because some episodes didn't make this list for various reasons. First, Hall of Egress. You can't talk about what makes Adventure Time so great and not at least mention Hall of Egress. I didn't put it on the full list because I've talked about it before and I also want to take another swing at making that video in the near future. Another episode to mention is What Was Missing. This episode is great and shows off what made early Adventure Time so special, but I have talked a little bit about it in a previous video, like almost 2 years ago at this point. And I want to take another swing at it, but talk about the full episode and break down why it's so great. So that'll also be coming sometime in the future. Then there are also Incendium, Burning Low, and Flute Spell. I've talked about Flute Spell, but as for the other two, romance might not be as important to you in this show as it was for me, so I'll exclude it and just talk about those on their own sometime. Plenty of Adventure Time videos to come, and they are going to be way better than what I used to make, so here's to better content. Now let's get to number 2. The number 2 spot on this list is kind of a cheat because it represents a stretch of episodes, that stretch of episodes being the Stakes mini-series, but I want to focus specifically on Checkmate, because this episode serves as a conclusion to Marceline's character arc. Checkmate on the surface is visually enthralling with one of the show's best songs and concludes one of the best stretches of episodes in the entire series. Looking beyond the surface, this episode serves as a conclusion to Marceline's character during the main run of the series, with the true bookend being in Obsidian. But Checkmate and the Stakes miniseries in general provides more depth to Marceline's character. We knew she was a sweet girl raised by Simon, but when Simon was barely cognizant and left to prevent himself from harming her, she had to fight constantly, which turned her into a more rough individual. We see that a lot of the fighting she did was to protect humans because she wanted another place to belong, but also being around humans reminded her of Simon, and it was because she protected other people that she became a vampire. Originally she was a vampire hunter, but the Vampire King came for her and she got bit. Living for 1,000 years, having seen more of life and more of the world than pretty much anyone else, Marceline understands that everything happens in cycles. Everything is constantly changing, but it always has an air of familiarity. This is something relatable to our world's problems. Looking at books and seeing how ignorance, poor leaders, and human nature constantly continue cycles of pain, hate, and failure. Imagine seeing 1,000 years or more of that cycle, and how that could weigh on your mind. It feels like Marceline was always looking for true change in the world. Not for the world, but something more personal. All the insanity that she had to bear witness to, and the emotional turmoil that must have put her through, and that we see that it has put her through. She seemingly wanted to escape this ever-reverting cycle that the world put itself in. But at the end of the episode, she seems content with how everything is constantly changing in its own small ways, but there's still that familiarity in the world. I have seen so many interpretations of Everything Stays and what its lyrics could mean, and how everybody can take it in their own ways. Some people took it as a more positive thing, others took it as a more negative thing, and a lot of people took it in a way that was most applicable to their current state. But for Marceline, I believe Everything Stays was her accepting the world as it was, and just enjoying the small changes that go on in it. Marceline lost Simon but got the Ice King, who became Simon again. She fell in love with PB, fell out of love with PB, and they're together again. Marceline outlived one kid with a hat and now has Finn and Jake. She had to accept her circumstances and make the most of it. Or maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? And finally, my number one episode on this list and my favorite Adventure Time episode is Jerry. The first season of Fiona and Cake had some amazing episodes, but Jerry stood out to me. This episode focuses on Simon and his relationship with Betty through his lens was diabetes-inducing levels of sweet. Seeing how caring Simon is as a partner, but also his parental side when he cheers up Fiona is why he's my favorite character. But what added to him being my favorite character were his character flaws. How he didn't see the writing on the walls about the problems in his relationship with Betty. How she was so enamored by his work that she couldn't view him as her equal. So she was constantly giving up everything for him. It seems like, and is definitely a bad character trait, but it's human. And this gets touched on in the next episode, I believe. But in this episode, these tendencies do get called out by Fiona in a way, but I'm getting ahead of myself. There's also the general aesthetic of this episode, where so much of the scenery looks like a painting. It's like Steven Universe backgrounds. During Everything in You, that scene, every aspect of the visuals were on point. During the flashbacks, the haze that was over the screen sold the vibe of it being a distant and treasured memory, and the song helped sell all of it, and it actually got to the point where this episode made me choke up while I was watching it for the first time. And that almost never happens when I'm watching a show. This sequence helped sell that these two were soulmates but were too flawed as people for it to work out in the long run. Or maybe it was just that their dynamic was flawed, with Betty viewing Simon as a superior even in a relationship where they were viewed as equals. Or at least where they were supposed to be viewed as equals. Because, as is touched on in a future episode, Simon never felt like he had to give up anything for Betty because she was always sacrificing for him. Once again, character flaw. But that's what makes him feel more human. Character flaws are what made Finn feel like a real human, and the same principle applies to Simon. And finally, the reveal at the end that ties this dead reality back to the adventures of Finn and Jake, the Lich, in his most terrifying form, as he wears the decomposing skin of Billy, is revealed, and before anyone could react, cease. In terms of menace, the Lich hasn't lost a step here, commanding the screen while present. I remember smiling so hard when I pieced together that this reality was created by the Lich's wish to Prismo. It was so well tied together, and I loved it. Fiona and Cake is my favorite stretch of Adventure Time episodes, and I cannot wait for more episodes. And I don't have to wait much longer because it comes out at the end of this month. All of this is stuff I can and plan on revisiting in a dedicated video, but this is what I've got for now. I'm very excited for the new season of Fiona and Cake and will review it in some manner when it airs. Subscribe for what's to come and have a nice day. Take care.